Hey guys, so back from work early today. I saw Akalon um, talking about this and reading this, and I thought because you guys seem to love when I read things, that I would read it as well and we can discuss this. So Ian Bates, red shirt guy, absolutely love the guy. Blizzard loves him because he points out all the you know inconsistencies. Like he was the one who pretty much brought up the other side of Azeroth. He went to BlizzCon and he was like, "Yeah, all the southern point regions of all the continents are tropical. So does that mean we're, above the equator or at it? And which, if that's the case, then is there an entire section of the planet that we haven't seen yet?" And I think it was Metzen who's like, "Yes and no." Basically, yes, there is more, but no, they hadn't thought of it at that point. But the guy just questions that Blizzard's like, fuck. They see him walking up, they're like, fuck, it's Ian. But he was reading the new Sylvanas novel, and apparently they retconned Sylvanas's death, essentially. So originally her death was she herself. She got to the top of Icecrown, we defeated Arthas, and then she pretty much felt like she had no purpose left in life. She wanted to die from the time that she was killed by Arthas, but she wasn't able to. So she made it her life's purpose to find and kill him. And then once that was done, she's like, I have nothing left to live for. So she jumped off the top of Icecrown, impaled herself on a spike of Serenite, was shown darkness and horrors and stuff like that, and she's like, I don't want to go back there. And that's why she's been trying so hard to bolster her forces, and why she had her Valkyr who were willing to die for her, because she was afraid of death. She didn't want to go back to that place, but now it's so okay. So back up a little bit. When she jumped and she impaled herself, there was darkness for her, and she was this horrible place. But then the Valkyr came and said, "Yeah, we can exchange our lives for yours and bring you back, and then we'll be by your side. We'll protect you, and should you die again, one of us will sacrifice our lives and restore yours." They made the deal, and that's what we've known since fucking Wrath of the Lich King. But here, apparently, it's all the jailers doing again. I mean, it was kind of the jailers doing in the first place now that we know the jailer, but... So, Ian says, am I reading this right? Because it reads to me like it's saying Sylvanas only jumped off Icecrown because the Valkyr was secretly compelling her to with mental torture. So, a little excerpt. She had achieved nothing at all, save continuing to exist out of, perhaps, pure stubbornness. Now there was no reason to continue that existence, that failed attempt to hold back eternal night long enough for revenge. Sylvanas knew she had been destined for peace upon her death, for rest, a reward for sacrificing her life freely and courageously to save others. But that had been the Ranger General's destiny, but not the Banshee Queen's, and now, too late, Sylvanas understood. 9 Valkyr hovered, silent, as Sylvanas stood atop the peak of Icecrown Citadel, pulling memories out of her head to torment her. But she had one last act of defiance left in her. Stay back and stay out of my head. She leaped freely taken, and to perhaps the only place in this or any world that she could mean certain death, to the nigh indestructible Sylvanas Windrunner. A long fall to impale herself upon jutting spikes made from the blood of a god. So now apparently they were like, kill yourself, do it, jump, ooh, look at all the scary pictures we're showing you, ooh. I think that's stupid. I think Sylvanas jumping off and impaling herself on Serenite because she felt worthless at that point, because she felt her mission had been accomplished. That was her mission in life, to save her people. She failed at that. She was killed by Arthas. So her life's purpose after that was to kill the man who killed her and killed her people. She had finished that. She completed it. She had nothing left to live for. I mean, it doesn't always have to be a just death, but it was one that fit her. You know, it's Sylvanas, the Banshee Queen, the Dark Lady, the one who takes no shit from anyone, the one who lives by her own rules. So her taking her own life to end her suffering and to, you know, to be free finally because she accomplished what she wanted to. But now it's like, no, no, his Valkyr went there and they were whispering things. Oh, whisper, whisper, go, you know, do it, jump, look at all these terrible things. Ooh, mental torment. So, and a lot of it, people chalked it up to the blood of a god. So Serenite is the blood of Yogg-Saron. So naturally, if you come in contact with it, you're gonna go a little crazy. So people thought, okay, she impaled herself on it. Naturally, she's gonna see terrible things. There's also this stuff that I would actually like to read. How much time we got? Oh, we still got plenty of time if you guys are willing to sit here. But this was actually really supposed to be out before Shadowlands, and this sets up the jailer as more of a sympathetic character. Pretty much what they were trying to do in game. They set him up as a sympathetic character. He's mysterious, but you do feel sorry for the guy, but you don't know if you should really believe everything he's saying. You don't know if you should trust him. But the way he speaks, you know, and Akalon said it was like, he's like, this is not the jailer. The jailer we know can barely form a sentence. So this is not the jailer, but it is. But so if you guys wanting to sit here and listen to me read, let me just lube up the vocals. All right. So this is on 282 of the Sylvanas novel. She saw only darkness, but it was not empty, and it was not oblivion. There was brutal cognizance, painful, agonizing presence, even though she lacked a body with which to physically feel. Emotions ripped her apart from the inside her own awareness. Agony, fear, regret. There were the weapons of the things around her used to torture her soul, as a mortal torturer used pincers, racks, and shears to physically torture the body. But the body had its blessed, welcome limitation: unconsciousness, death, and ending. This did not. The gleeful, targeted torment would have no end, ever. No becoming numb to the pain, no disassociation from the physical, nothing between her and the agony, each twist or revelation is more painful than the next. Sylvanas would have screamed, but she had no mouth. I mean, the visuals are pretty powerful when you really think about them, which really wish they would shown this in the game. But Sylvanas would have screamed, but she had no mouth. The single word came thundering through cacophony of silent excruciation. Enough. And the torment ceased, though the horrible memory, continued. How would she see with no eyes, move with no body? You perceive this place because I will it to be so. Could she speak? Yes. Show yourself then. The darkness lightened slightly, shifting from utter blackness to a shadowy, gray-green gloom. Before her loomed an enormous shape, not merely large, but vast, powerfully built. He was human-like, but on a gargantuan scale. Around him were manacles and broken chains with links larger than she was, tall, scattered on the stone floor. The being was swathed in shadow, save for the hazy glow of blurry runes running across his spread arms, around his wrists, and on his lower face. He was barefoot and bare-chested, remnants of what must have been armor on his lower arms, wrist, and neck. He still wore pieces of chain, their ends glowing brightly with magic. Sylvanas sensed eternity weaving around and through him. This is the Maw. Only those utterly beyond redemption are banished here. And here they will be tortured for all time. Sylvanas regarded the figure. Now that the pain had receded, she could at least attempt to control her seething emotion and chose to focus on the being. You were a prisoner, she said. I still am. Then who rules this Maw? I am the jailer here. His words were riddles. She decided to press him. You claim to be both prisoner and jailer. What a curious fate you have chosen. Sylvanas, definitely. The deep voice grew bitter. No one is here by choice, Sylvanas Windrunner. He knew her. If my decisions brought me here, didn't yours as well? Sylvanas asked. Your mortal mind does not yet understand, he replied, his voice weary but patient. The greatest deception that the Makers ever perpetrated was to fool us into believing that we had a choice in any facet of our existence. The words struck her. She sensed the truth in them. And what do you know of my choices? She moved closer and saw that his skin was a hue of gray, similar to her own, though she still could not make out the runes scribed onto his flesh. You have fought so hard for freedom, Sylvanas Windrunner, for control. It is a battle that I have fought as well, and one that I have witnessed play out across the eons more times than there are numbers to count. And all those battles, courageous and foolhardy alike, were for naught. I fought for and won free will, jailer, Sylvanas shot back. The instant I could, I wrested control back from my tormentor. I killed when I wished, who I wished. And when the vengeance I sought was denied me, I ended my life as I wished. Which, I mean, that kind of contradicts what we saw about them kind of pushing her to do it. She didn't choose to do anything. She might have had ideas of doing it, but showing bad things to her, tormenting her mentally and psychologically caused her to jump. So it wasn't as she wished. He sighed, and his next words were tinged with what could almost be compassion. I'm Zoval. Before I was a jailer of this place, I reigned over the realms of death. From the precipice of eternity itself, I stood as arbiter over every mortal soul whose brief flicker of life had sputtered out. In an instant, I knew the entirety of their existence, and time after time, do you know what I saw? Fragile beings left to the fickle whims of fate. Their world, their kin, whether they were wise or simple, pale or sickly, these things were forced upon them. From the moment they drew their first breath until they exhaled their last. The choice was never theirs. And when their lives ended, it was my duty to decide the soul's fate for all eternity. Anger flared as she thought of her own life, the decisions made for her. No, I refuse to believe this nonsense. Most deny it. A few eventually accept it. But no one can escape it, because escape has never been part of the Maker's grand design. No one escapes the Maw, or any of the infinite afterlives forged to bind mortal souls. From its conception to execution, and throughout all that has been and is, the design is gravely, cruelly, and worst of all, indifferently flawed. So we're kind of seeing what he's going after, which, it was hints of it in the game, but this is letting you know him more on a more personal level. And while, yes, like I said, you don't know if you can trust him, you do feel more compassion for this jailer that's being portrayed in the book than the one that we see in game. That's how it should have been. They should have given us a character that we cared about. Even if it was a villain, you're supposed to feel some kind of emotion towards them. But people were like, we don't hate the jailer, we don't like him. He's just there. He's just there. He's a terrible villain. But let us continue. When Arthas struck her down, Sylvanas had felt, just for a moment, that peace that had awaited her. Had that been part of this flawed design? How could her situation, her death at the hands of Arthas, from the blade of Frostmourne, how could that have been inevitable? Her mind, still reeling from the cacophony she endured earlier, she could not wrap itself around such a thing. Not yet, and so she focused on something else. "Why are you here?" she asked him. She did not care, but as long as he was speaking to her, the torment had ceased, and she did not care about that deeply. "What was your crime?" "I dared to defy the will of the Makers. I sought to break their flawed design, to replace it with a better one. And for this, my own kin condemned me to this unjust fate, a fate that I must share with the damned, broken souls I oversee." Again, Sylvanas thought of all that she had endured in life, and undeath. Resentment, drowned out by blind agony, crept in again. "In many ways, your story echoes my own," the jailer continued. "We were both betrayed and broken. I, too, was torn asunder, and I understand well what it is like to feel achingly, eternally incomplete." He lifted his gray, hairless head. His eyes glowed the same hue as the blur of runes that led from either side of his nose down his face, the one in the center of his forehead. Her gaze drifted down to the gaping chasm in the center of his chest. Something in Sylvanas was terrified by the sight, a fear deep and primal. Had she had hands of flesh, they would have clutched her own lifeless heart. How often had it seemed to her that her chest was simply devoid of one. Sylvanas thought of her death, and how Arthas's hatred and petulance had ripped bliss away from her when it was almost hers. How the world she gazed upon with unliving eyes seemed a shadow of one that haunted her memories. "They ripped out your heart," she murmured. "Far more than that," the jailer said. "I sought to change the fate of all, and for that I was torn in two. They took the essence of my power and fashioned a new arbiter, one without a will to defy the grand design. Then my own brother carved into my flesh the runes that were meant to bind me for eternity." Her eyes focused on the glowing symbols, and for the first time the hazy shapes hardened into crystal clarity. And in that instant, she summoned forth the banshee's wail to shatter the darkness with her rage. "Frostmourne, you bear the mark of the blade that ended me." The jailer's voice remained cold and dispassionate. "A blade designed by the vengeful mind of my brother. The same brother who used his words of domination to bind me." Her mind raced. Could what he said be true? Could all of this destruction and torment inflicted upon her world by Arthas Menethil be architected by the same cruel beings that created this jailer? Her soul blazed like fire at the thought of it. And then we have a final bit at the bottom, but no more than that. So this gives more context to what he's doing. We still don't know we don't know how he wanted to fix it. I think he really didn't have a full plan. He just knew that the way the system worked was not the way it should be. So he knew he needed to tear it down, but he didn't know. It's like, okay, well, it's torn down. What am I going to do now? What am I going to, how am I going to make this just? Maybe it was going to be what Pelagos is doing, giving everyone a fair shot. Maybe asking them where they think they deserve to go. But apparently he figured he was going to be a fair and just arbiter if he was able to tear it down and create his own system, one that didn't, condemn or make that fate pretty much predetermined to everyone, where they go, their life, and this and that. So I feel more compassion towards the jailer, just from the small excerpt. Obviously, there's going to be more. There's more of him throughout the book, but just these small passages gives you the idea of who the jailer is, what he wants. He did say we do know for a fact that the rune carver was the one who, on his face and his head, and he was the one who created domination magic. So essentially, the jailer has been kind of telling the truth the whole time. And people have thought for a while that maybe the Eternal Ones are not as nice as they seem. After all, the Primus, or Rune Carver, was the one who created domination magic, and they all went along with it. They're all the ones who condemned him to the maw. So people are like, okay, there's something off about these Eternal Ones. They come off like, oh, can you help us get some anima here? We're just having a bit of a drought. Could you help us? But everyone from the beginning, when you talk to them, it's like there's just something off about them. I don't think they're nearly as nice as they appear. Now, Denathrius is pretty much upfront about it. You can tell just looking at him, he's going to be a douchebag. But then you have the Archon, you have the Winter Queen, you have the Primus, who's like, oh, look at him, he's just a kindly old man. But there's more to them than what we're seeing. And I'm glad that Pelagos is the new arbiter, because we know he's going to provide, just, compassionate judgment towards any soul that goes through, whether bad or good. Even if it's someone like Arthas, someone who's done terrible things, he's going to give them a fair, just treatment. But the jailer in the game, he's just kind of there. He says like one or two lines, and that's it. We don't really understand what he wants. We don't know why he wants it, really. And he's just kind of there. We don't like him. We don't hate him. He's just a meaningless character. But had this come out before Shadowlands, like it was supposed to, it would have really made us feel more for this big baddie that they were setting up for and revealing. I mean, the guy's cosmic, almost cosmic level. He's, death, essentially. And we're just like, who cares? We don't... He just pops up from time to time and is like, oh, death is eternal. Oh, die, mortals. Despair. And that's it. He doesn't talk that much. But between that and the retconning, essentially, of why Sylvanas jumped off Icecrown, and some people might say it's not that big of a deal, but it is a big deal. It is a big deal. She, like I said, because it was a death that fit her. She got to Icecrown, we defeated Arthas, and she had no reason left to live anymore. But now to know that, she was being bullied mentally, essentially, that's stupid. I love the fact that she just like, fuck it. I've done what I want to. I'm done. She jumped off on her own free will. But no, now she's been mentally bullied into it? Come on. Come the fuck on. Sylvanas is not going to be fucking mentally bullied into doing something. So, but, there's also, what was the other one? Which was this? Did Sylvanas actually care about the Forsaken? Let's see this one. Everything was a weapon now, to be aimed and released whenever she chose. Certainly the Horde and its leaders, but even the Forsaken themselves. For Sylvanas Windrunner knew three things. They loved her, that love was pure and true as creatures such as they could offer. And the last truth, one she could never reveal, was that any semblance of compassion she felt for them depended entirely on their continued usefulness to her ambitions. So she liked everyone as long as they were useful to her. The minute they stopped being useful, she stopped caring. She had no problem fighting for the Horde because, everything that the Horde did were just means to an end for her. But pretty much it's like with Sourfang, with that fight, how she kind of comes out and shows her true colors and says the Horde is nothing. She had no use for it anymore. She had no use for it. So the minute that we became useless to her, she showed who she really was. And yeah, but now that we have the Ranger General back, the compassionate Sylvanas, of course she's going to be in the mall for some time, but we have that Sylvanas back. So when she cares about something now, we know that she's caring about it because she genuinely cares. But so yeah, Sylvanas just treated us as tools, ready. Oh yeah, I love you guys so much. The minute we come and disposable to her, it's like, well, fuck you guys. And then what's this one? There's one about Thanos. I love this passage so much. I laughed out loud at the whiplash from how quick it goes from making Thanos sound like a tough fighter to possibly the ugliest person she's ever seen. Oh god. Blah blah blah, by a male figure who put up his hands to show he had no weapons. Sylvanas blinked. You are a human, she said. Ah, what gave me away? He was not the first human Sylvanas had ever seen. On rare occasions, human couriers had approached the king, the prince, or sometimes even her father. They were in uniform. They were uniform in their demeanor and tended to blend together in her mind. None of them had been remarkable enough for her to remember. This one was tall, burly, and dressed in field garb. His quiver was strapped to his back. Yep, it's the Thanos. The hard leather of his jerkin was crisscrossed with scratches made by a variety of weapons, judging by the depth of and shape. His boots were mud-splattered, and the hem of his cloak was dark with old stains. Sylvanas narrowed her eyes regarding him. Old stains, yes, but new ones as well, dark and wet. Blood, perhaps. He was also possibly the ugliest person she had ever seen. His face was lumpy, as if it had been punched many times, and the bones broken had poorly healed. Small, dark eyes peered out from beneath bushy black eyebrows. Still, Sylvanas did never lower her bow. Lorthamar, did we get all of them? She called. It seems so, he responded. It would appear that I am in your debt, human. The stranger lifted uncomfortably. Uncomfortably. It was not. Wait. Who is talking now? The stranger. Okay. It was nothing, he said. His voice suited the rest of him perfectly. Rough and raspy. Yep, that's our Thanos. Just lucky I was there. Lucky, yes, but not a coincidence, said Sylvanas. Were you spying on us? The man sighed. Can I lower my hands? Not yet. I ask you a question. So, and it's weird because if I remember correctly, Thanos and Sylvanas when they were alive were lovers, essentially. She respected him, he respected her, and they did kind of have a thing. But apparently after he died, she didn't recognize him, and he was ugly to her, But yeah, if I remember correctly, they were a thing because they both had mutual respect for each other. They respected each other's talents and skills. They were both skilled archers. So I do believe they had a thing together, and that's why he was so essentially smitten with her in death, because he's always loved her. He always had a love for her, and at some point it looked like the feelings for him eventually came back, and she did kind of. I think Thanos, despite that fact that he was useful to her, I think Thanos was actually the only person that she did somewhat care about, because she cared about him and before she died. So I think he was the only one who you could say he legitimately loved. So for Sylvanas, even to love one person, that's huge. But poor Thanos. so handsome in life, and then in death, he's like, ugh. Poor guy. He's still a douchebag, so he deserves every bit of it. But and that's a genuine compliment. And me not being smarmy. It's a very funny scene, and it goes in an interesting direction. That Sylvanas fell for Thanos precisely because he was so just so curt and homely. The polar opposite of everything she'd come to resent about the nobility of QT. Well, Thalas. And I like the Lorthamar was there. I like doing that Lorthamar voice. Lorthamar Thoreau. But yeah, I just wanted to read you guys some of these excerpts and see what you guys think. What do you think about them basically saying that Sylvanas was mentally bullied into jumping off of Icecrown? I think that's fucking stupid. What do you think about the jailer giving more of a backstory and more reason in the book than we got in the freaking game? You know, do you kind of feel bad for the guy now? Do you like him more, or is it like, yeah, he's still Shadowlands is done. Who really fucking cares now? But anyways, let me know what you guys think. That's gonna do it for me. You guys know the drill. I'll see you guys later. Bye, guys.